Okay, welcome back. I'm Professor J Patterson, and we're working through a series of coding tutorials in order to build the game Othello, or the generic name Reversi, as a web application. We've done a bunch of coding so far, but we're probably just a little bit under halfway of the way that we need to go. Right now, what we've got is we've got a website that has the ability for people to come to the website and form a lobby. Let's take a look at that, given the code where we are. First of all, in Visual Studio, I'm going to start my application by running server.js. I'm going to run it from within Visual Studio, and you can see that it's running down here and it's running clean, no bugs or anything. So over here, I've got two browsers that are opened up to the server instance on my local host. I'm just going to reload them to see what we've got. And here we can enter names. We can enter the names of the people that are want to play, Don and Bizarro Don. We enter the lobby, and we have this nice sort of place where two people can meet. You can both windows see the other person is present, and we've got this invite button. But the invite button doesn't actually do anything right now. It kind of responds to the click action by lighting up and sort of pulsing when you click on it, but it doesn't actually do any work for us in the game. And so what we want to do in this tutorial is we want to have that button on the left side cause the player on the right side to be invited, and vice versa. So to do that, we're going to need to make some changes to main.js because that's where the code for controlling the website is. And we're also going to need to make some changes to server.js because that's where the code that is the peering point where the two players interact with each other to invite one another. Again, the interaction is that when you see the invite button, you can invite on one side. So for example, this person will click invite and the button should change to invited. And on this side, the button will change from invite to play because if this player has been invited, they will hit the play button and then the game will start. Okay? So let's go ahead and start off our application. And where I want to start, I think, is in main.js. So let's go to our main. This is the client side, and we're going to bring it up if I can find it. There we go. All right, and got some basic stuff going on. One bit of housekeeping that I want to do before we get going is a little bug that someone pointed out to me. Let me show you how the bug manifests itself. If you're in the lobby here and you enter, you just don't put anything in and you do enter your lobby, you can see at the top it says '(s) because the way that it works right now is it assumes that you meant to enter an empty string. That doesn't make a lot of sense. So what we're going to do is we're also going to have the empty string turn into an anonymous user. So let's do that. What I want to do is in this piece here on line 16 in my code, when we test the username and try and get it from the URL or IRI parameter, we check to see if there's an error if it's undefined, can't find it, if it's null for some reason, if it's null as an actual null, or whether it turns to null as a string. And we're going to add one more and say, or username triple equals empty string, just two double quotes right after each other. And then two parentheses at the end of that. That's just going to add an additional case of when the user doesn't type anything in. Let me save that up, and then we can come over here, and if we go back and we do a hard reload, empty cache and hard reload, and now we hit enter lobby, you can see that you get an anonymous name if you do that, which is fine. It's not, it'd be great if we had something clever, but that's good for now. All right, so that's the one piece of housekeeping. So now what we need to do is we need to change main.js so our invite button actually does something, and we want it to actually do an invitation. So what we're going to do is we're going to navigate down to our make invite button. Right now you can see that our make invite button doesn't do anything. We create it, it's graphics, it's some HTML, and we insert it into the document when we make the invite button. And then the make invite button is actually called down here in response to someone joining the room. So if the server tells us that someone is joining the room, then what we end up doing is we end up adding this make invite button to our display. And that's why anything shows up at all. So we want to go back to our make invite button here, and we want to add some capacity. We want to add some interactivity to our invite button. So we're going to add a function that gets called when it gets clicked on. So to do that, we're going to do new node.click, and we're going to pass it in a parameter. And what we're doing here is we're saying, hey, when someone clicks on this button, what is it that we want to have happen? And what we want to have happen is we want to have the server told that someone has been invited. All right, so all right, so basically what we're doing is we're just going to send the server a message. And so to do that, we need to create a payload that we're going to send to the server, set that equal to curly brackets, and we're just going to send it one particular parameter, which is the requested user, or who it is that we are going to actually invite. And we're going to pass it the socket ID of the person that we want to invite, of the other player that we want to invite. Now this variable isn't defined in this scope, so we're going to need to add it as a parameter that gets sent in when we make our invite button. All right, so we have our payload. It's not equals, it's a colon. We're setting up a little data structure here. It's a dictionary for those who are following along at home. And then what we want to do is we want to do a console log message, and I'm going to grab that. I'm going to, let's see, client log. I'm going to grab it from send chat message. All right, so I just copied it, and I moved it here. It's console.log, single quote, 4 stars, client log message, sending invite command. And then we're going to stringify not the request because we're calling it a payload in this method. All right, and then what we want to do, I'm looking at these errors that are coming on line 35 and 38. And the problem here is that we didn't put it within a function. So we need to pass it a function. So we're going to do open and close parentheses. So that's an anonymous function that takes no parameters, and equal and a greater than. That points to the function, and then some curly brackets, a starting curly bracket there, and an ending curly bracket after the console. That's better. And then the last thing that we need to do is we actually need to send that message. So we'll say socket.emit, and the message is invite, and the data is payload. So that will send the message to the server saying that we are inviting a person. And that action is going to be taken when the invite button is pressed, and we are making that invite button when we see that someone has joined the room. But we need to go to where the make invite button is called, because we have to see who is it that's joining the room so that we can make sure that we invite that person. So we have to pass that over, payload.socket_ID. And so this is in the join room response method. Come up here, join room response method, which is where we add our button, and that's good to go. All right. All right, so now the way that we've been structuring our code is that every time that there is a message that is sent from the client to the server responds with just an indication that it got that message. And we're going to do that here as well. So just like we have a join room response or send chat message response, we're going to have an invite response as well. And I think for that, I'm going to start with our code that's the send chat message response. That seems to be the one that's closest. So I'm going to grab this code, the socket.onSend chat message response. I'm going to copy that, copy everything there, make sure I get that last parenthesis. And I'm going to go back up, and just so I have all my related functions together, I'm going to place it after my make invite button. And it's not going to be a send chat message response, it's going to be an invite response. Now this is a message that the server is going to send back, but that we haven't set up yet. It will send back a payload, and in that payload we want to just do the same kinds of error checking. We want to make sure that it didn't fail. And when we get this back, what we're going to want to do is we are going to want to change the button that we have. So to do that, we're going to have another helper function that we're going to use. We're going to have to write, and we're going to create a new node that we're going to put into our document object model. And we're going to say make invited button. Make sure you get that D in there. And we're going to add that. And we're going to replace some code that's already in our DOM. So we're going to use jQuery. We're going to use a single quote, and we're going to look for the element that starts with socket underscore. We already put this in our document. Single quote, we're going to add the payload.socket_ID. Then we're going to continue adding to that string. We're going to do a plus, a single quote, and then this is important, a space, and then a button. What we're doing here is we're constructing a selector, and we're saying we want the button that is a child of the socket_socket ID, depending on which player has been invited. So when we find that particular location, we are going to need to replace it. We're going to replace that button with the button that we just made. So that will replace our make invited button. All right. So now we need to do our make invited button. It makes sense that we would put that next to our make invite button. So let's grab that. Let's grab make invite button. I didn't grab the F, so I'm gonna have to add the F there. Make sure I add the D after invited, make invited button. For now, we don't need socket ID. It can just be empty. We're going to create a button. It's going to be a button outline. I think actually what I want this to do is to be just primary. So it'll be blue, and we'll change the text so that it says invited. It'll be blue and filled in. And then we will create that new node, and we are going to return it. We don't have to add any functionality to it yet. That'll be in our next video. All right, so that will make the button that then gets placed back in there. Now later on, we're going to need a play button and an engaged button. So let's go ahead and make those now, even though we're not going to see them come into play. So let's also make a play button. And let's make that be a button that uses the secondary color, which happens to be green. We'll do that. And then we'll make a start game button as well. And we'll make this one be danger, I guess, which will end up being red. We'll say starting game so that the user understands that something is happening. All right, clean that up. All right, I'm going to save it and format the code. I have my editor set up so that when I save, it automatically formats. And I think that's pretty good. That should get us to the point at which we are inviting someone to play with us. We're sending a message to the server. We are handling the response back. I think that's everything we need. Then the only other thing that we need to do is we need to make the code on server.js respond to that message. So let's see. Let me take care of that. So in order to do that, we're going to want to go to server.js. And where's server.js here? There we go. And just like we have, let's see, what's a good one to start with? Join room. I guess we can start with join room, although it's got a lot here. All right, we'll go ahead and start with join room. So we'll copy join room, and we'll place a copy of it right below it. And instead of handling, in this version of join room, instead of handling a join room message, we're going to handle the invite message that's being sent from the client. We're going to get the payload. We're going to make sure that we log this correctly and say the server received the command invite, and we'll log the payload so we can see what's happening. We'll make sure the payload is good. Client did not send a payload. We'll write down that this is the invite response that's sending back with an error, and we'll log that the invite command failed. All right, now from this, we are going to need to get some information. We're going to need to get some information from the user, and we're going to need to get some of it from the payload, but we're also going to need to get some of it from our data structure that we already have. So let's start by getting our requested user from our payload. And that's going to be equal to what was sent over. Make sure we get requested and user, get all that good. And then we're also going to need the room and the username of the player that we are inviting, but we're not sending that over because the client doesn't actually know, it doesn't have a data structure for that. So we're going to pull it out of a data structure that the server is maintaining, which is players. And so we'll say players, because when you join players, you get an entry in this data structure, and when you disconnect, it goes away. So the room will be equal to players socketid.room, and the username will be equal to players.socket, bracket socket.id username. That looks good. And now we want to go through and just check to make sure that everything came out okay. So let's see. Let's first check that our requested user came across all right. And so what I did just there is I copied the room check here, and I put a copy up here, and now I'm going to change this so it's requested user. Make sure that that is, if it's undefined or it's equal to null, then I'm going to change this a little bit. I like this other way of specifying our data structures. The result is going to be equal to fail. End it with a comma. And the message that we're going to send back is going to be client did not send a valid user to invite to play. And we'll say did not, well, let's say we did not request a valid user so we can track down the error. And then this is an error message, so we'll send back. This error message is the we're going to end that data structure. Get rid of the semicolon at the end, and then we are going to send back the error message, and it is an invite response. All right, and we will also log that the invite command failed, and we'll type it out. Okay, that looks good. All right, if for some reason we can't get the room, we will do the same thing. I'm going to copy those 4 lines starting with response, and I'm going to paste it here, and I'm going to delete the 4 lines that were there before. I'm going to change this so it says client did not request, let's see, invited, let's see, the user that was invited does not have a room, is not in a room, is not in a room. So this would be a problem with our data structure, so we'll send that message back. So I'm going to come up here, I'm going to copy these 3 errors, these 3 lines here, and I'll put them down below, and then I'm going to get rid of the join room responses. All right, good. So that's if our room is not healthy. All right, then I'm going to copy all of the if statement under room from 172 to 178, and I'm going to put that under username, and we're going to do the same thing with username. We're going to say the user that was invited does not have a name registered. All right, that's our log message. It failed, and there we are. All right, let me just take a look at these error messages here for a moment. Since we already made that one change when we entered our lobby, let's go ahead and add that check as well. So we'll add an additional clause here when we check our requested user, and we'll say if the user is undefined or the user is equal null, or 2 vertical bars, the requested user triple equals empty string. So we'll check to see if it's the empty string. We'll do the same thing with the room. So or the room triple equals the empty string, and if the username triple equals, double bar username triple equals empty string. Okay. There's no space in those, by the way. It's just 2 double quotes next to each other. All right, so that means that we've gotten a good invitation. We've got good data to invite people with. Now we need to handle it. So what we need to do is we need to check to make sure that the invited player is present. To make sure, because what can happen is multiple people can invite the player at one time, and so we want to make sure that they didn't already accept an invitation while this message was in transit. So we're going to have to change this line a little bit because we don't want everything to come back as sockets. We want everything to come back as socket IDs. So we're going to say io.in.room. We're going to change this to all capital S sockets, lowercase o sockets. Then we're going to get sockets, and this time sockets is going to be a different data type. So the first condition is going to be the invitee isn't in the room. And the way we're going to know that is because sockets is undefined, or sockets is null, or not sockets, and we have to change include to has because we're working with socket IDs, not the socket itself, just the ID. If this happens, we're going to fail. We're going to send back a fail message. So let's set it up like we had. Actually, I'm just going to come up here and grab it from here. Grab those, put it there. All right. All right, what failed? The user that was invited is no longer in the room. All right, invite response, invite command failed. Let's save that and reformat it. Great. All right, so this means that now the invitee is in the room. Everything is good. Invitee is in the room. We have all the data we need. So now we need to go ahead and send back 2 responses. None of this, all this has to do with join room. We don't want that. We're going to send back 2 responses. One response is that it was a success. That's coming from the player that did the inviting. And the other is that someone has, if the person who was invited needs to be told that they were invited. So let's set up our response. Our response is going to be a data structure, and I'm just going to grab it from here again. This time, though, it's a success. And the data that we're going to send back is going to be the user that was invited. So this is, it's just for the purposes of sending something back, I suppose. And then with that, we want to go ahead and send back the message. So socket.emit, this is the response to the one that invited. So invite response, make sure you spell that right. Response is what we're sending back. Okay, that goes back to the person that did the inviting. And now we're going to copy that and paste that below. And now we're going to send a message back to the person that was invited. And we're not going to send them their name. We're going to send them the socket that invited them. So that's who invited them. And this is not a invite response message. This is going to be, first of all, it's going to not a socket emit. It is going to be socket dot to requested user underscore user underscore user. And we're going to emit, and the message that we're sending back is invited. And then we're going to send the response. And then last thing we need to do is just log it. So we'll log down here and say invite command succeeded. And we'll send back the response. All right, so when you are invited, you need to change your button on server side. So let's walk through the logic of this again. All right, so starting in main.js, you join the when you load up the page, the first thing that happens is way down at the bottom, you send the join room message, set up the title, set up some key presses. But basically, you send your join room. This function ends, and you wait. You wait for the server to respond. The server will respond with a join room response, at which point you come down here and you anyone that joins is going to be you're going to be told that they joined, and you're going to set up buttons to invite them. When you make your invite button, there's going to be some code associated with that. When you click on it, let's go look at what happens when you click on that make invite button. When you click on that invite button, you're going to send a new message that invites someone. You're going to wait for the invite response, and then you're done. The server will send back an invite response message, at which point you will change your button saying that, oh, that player that I invited, that I clicked invite on is now invited. And then the other player is going to get an invited message, but actually we haven't implemented the invited message yet. That's the one that's going to put the play button down. So let's go ahead and handle what happens if you're the second player that got invited. And we'll start by, we're in main.js. We're going to copy the invite response. And the message that we're getting now is that we have been invited. We have a payload. We want to make sure it's good. We want to make sure it didn't fail. We want to make our play button. We want to get our make our play button here. And then we want to replace the existing button with our new node. I think that's good. All right, so now I'm going to save that, format it up automatically, and assuming that I have no bugs, it should work as planned. All right, so let's see. The first thing that I'm going to do is you see I stopped my server. I'm going to restart my server and just make sure that I don't have any bugs in there, syntax bugs. All right, something went wrong on line 165. Let me see what's going on 165. Okay. Not sure what's going wrong. Let's make sure I have my spaces, my parentheses and my strings all set. I'm going to go out to the end here, and that all looks good. Oh, the equal sign here. That's not an equal sign. When you're making an object, you use colons. All right, and I'm going to have that a bunch of places. So all the places where I have message and then an equal sign instead of a colon, I'm going to replace that with a colon. There's a second one. There's a third one. And that looks like it. All right, so I saved that. So any places where I was building a response and I had message equals instead, like here. All right, so let's debug that, see if we can run it cleanly. Now we have a problem on 174, probably the same thing, I betcha. Same thing, yep. Here's an example. With building a response message, you should have a colon there instead of an equals. I guess I missed one when I was searching. All right, let's try and run that again. Do I have any bugs on my server? Looks like, at least for now, my server's running cleanly. And now let's come over here and let's go back to my entrance page and let me go ahead and empty cache and hard reload to make sure that I don't have any old code in my browser. I have an inspect pane open on another page and everything is operating cleanly, so I don't have any bugs there. I'm looking in the console. So let's go ahead and invite someone. Don gets invited, and then Bizarro Don also gets invited. Both players show up in the lobby. I can say, hello, Big BD. Hello, Big D. All right, the chat function is working. When I hit invite, oh, it didn't work. What I was expecting was to see play show up here. Now I don't see any errors in my main.js, so I must have some sort of error in my server. So let's take a look at our server and see what happened. I look down here. I see requested user, fail, that user it was invited is no longer in the room. Interesting. All right, so, okay, so the error that I see down here at the bottom is fail, the user that was invited is no longer in the room. So to find that error message, come down here, the user that was invited is no longer in the room. I see here that I checked not sockets.hasSocket, and that should be requested user, because I'm comparing socket IDs, not the actual socket. Let me save everything up and let me restart my server. No bugs yet. Let me go back one, empty cache and hard reload. Let's see if I can get that to work. Right click and right click. And then we'll do A and B. We click invite. Great, we got the play button. I actually wanted that to be green, not gray. So I'm wondering what it was that made that. I thought I made that secondary. Let me take a look at that. Under main.js, let's look at make play button. Oh, right, so I don't want that to be secondary, I want that to be success. Now, the logic of the coloring is that it's supposed to correspond to a successful state, but I actually just want a green button. So we'll try that again. Empty cache and hard reload, empty cache and hard reload. Go ahead and invite. There we go, that's the play button. All right, so a handful of bugs that I had there, but basically we've got that flow going where we do invited and play, and that's kind of the interaction we wanted. Next thing to do is to get us so that we can uninvite and then so that we can actually play a game. All right, thanks for your attention.